Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Dan Crawford from HammyN.com. We're on to preview the upcoming match for Fulham against Manchester City. And we are actually live on my X account, live on the Cottage Talk Facebook page, and also live on YouTube. However, if you want to listen to the show, this is going to be exclusive on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. So if you want to listen to the podcast version, you'll have to become a member of the Cottage Talk Patreon page. All right, Dan, how are you doing? It's been a while since we've talked. How are you feeling after that massive victory against Brentford? We did the double against Brentford. You must still be thrilled.
Absolutely delighted, because I don't know about you, I didn't see it coming sort of after the way we finished the first half. And nice to see the boys putting in a big performance to set up this last game. Really intriguingly, I'm excited to talk to you about what we might see on Sunday.
I'm excited to talk about it, Dan. Before we go on, I want to ask you about one player going back to this match, because I talked to Tony about this. You and I have talked a lot about Josh King. What did you make of his performance in a short period of time, coming on as a substitute, and I thought made a difference?
Made a massive difference. I think he showed exactly what those of us who've had such high hopes for Josh for a long period of time. We've seen a little glimpses of his quality in the senior team. Remember when he came on towards the start of the season at Birmingham City in the League Cup and had a really good senior debut, and then has shown a little bit in Premier League matches. But I thought in the derby, particularly with the position of the game, when he came onto the pitch, he made a massive difference. He played a key part in both goals, but also the intelligence of the way he utilised the ball, his movement, particularly occupying space, allowing Wilson to drive inside for that third goal, but also the way he picked up the ball after Wilson had got crowded out for the second goal, and had the presence of mind not to try anything too remarkable, but to just ferry the ball out to Kenny Tete. I think there's potential for him to play a big role going forward, and obviously he's had a England under-19s call up, so he'll be involved in that England setup in the very near future. But hopefully we will see much more of Josh, perhaps even playing a bigger role in the first team. I would just preface that by saying we obviously have to handle him very carefully. You remember you and I really doing regular shows in that period where Karim Fry came into the Fulham team a long time ago, and Fulham's hierarchy still references that, and Matthew Briggs to a point still reference that as a learning point in how they handle young, talented players, which is why Marco is, for my money, handling it pretty well. In terms of Josh's ongoing exposure to the first team, you obviously want him to commit his future to the club, but I'm less worried about that than some of the more terminally online members of our Fulham community, shall we say.
Well, what's interesting about him, I'm glad that we're actually starting the show talking about it, because I certainly want to get into talking about when we get to talking about the starting 11, because I'm going to tell you right now, I want him to start against Manchester City. However, I like what you said, Dan, about basically trying to get it right in regards to managing his time, bringing him along. But what's hard is when you see a performance like that and you see the potential that he has, and you see what he brought. And this is nothing against Smith Rowe. They're different types of players. But when you put him in the number 10 position, as Tony said during the last show we did, he was hungry, Dan. We're talking about with Josh King, but it was also very involved with his teammates, and he offers something different than I think Smith Rowe in the number 10 role. Would you agree?
Yeah, but it's the effervescence of youth. I mean, we talked about this before. You talk about it with somebody like Ryan Sessegnon when he comes onto the scene. Initially, when you're a young player, you've got no fear. and you're also looking to create that point of difference. There's nothing to lose at 2-1 down in a local derby. The teams who you're playing against won't have seen as much of Josh King. He had more of a freer role. You could see it was much more fluid, the formation at that point. Look how high Tom Kearney got both in the air to head the goal, which is still quite funny to me because he only ever scored 3 headers for Fulham. But he got so far forward. And at that point on the pitch were King, Wilson, Traore, Anawobi, and you were in that period of for Brentford as a defensive system, they didn't know who to pick up and where the runners were going. Right. So I think Josh can offer quite a lot in a number of different positions, whether that's in a deeper midfield role, a more conventional defensive midfield, central midfield role as a number 10, or we've seen him even utilised from wide, or a combination of all three, right? So I think that the strength of Fulham's adventurous approach is that he can learn to play Premier League football in a less pressurised environment by drifting in from different positions. And maybe at the moment, the best utilisation of him is from the bench. Because unless you can get the ball to him in the key positions early on, I'd worry in a game like Sunday's game, for instance, where Manchester City will dominate most of the ball. Is he going to have that ability to get on the ball and pose Manchester City problems? Is the ball going to get to him as much
that's a good
as
point.
we would want?
That's actually a valid point. And I think Smith Rowe has run into that problem when we play teams on the level of, say, Man City, where he doesn't get a chance to get the ball. So that's a good point. All right, Dan, let's now talk about Marco's pressers that just happened today, his presser. And there was some interesting little tidbits from it. Let's start with him talking about the ongoing negotiations with Tete and Kearney. So they really are, I'm talking about Fulham, making a concerted effort to get new deals for these two players. Let's talk about them individually. What are your thoughts about Kenny Tete? Do you see this as something that could happen, or is this a long shot at this point? Where do you fall on that?
Well, I mean, it's important to say, like Marco, I don't sit in these negotiations. If I did, I'd probably be paying Kenny Tete exactly what he wanted, because I think, regardless of his injury problems, and those can't be discounted, he does seem to be more injury. But I mean, that's interesting, Stuart. You've just put up that comment from is it Stuart Abre? I'm not sure how you say Stuart's surname.
Stuart Abre.
Sorry, Stuart. So I'm not sure that Tete is leaving because of his injury record. I think actually Kenny has been offered, from what I understand it, a fairly generous contract. But at the point at which it was offered to him earlier in the season, he wasn't in the team. He was injured. He wasn't sure whether he was going to get back in the team. And of course, the thing that's happened is we dropped out of European contention altogether. And I don't know this in terms of Kenny's representation, but certainly with players who've left the club previously on free transfers or on at the end of their contracts, they've been told by their agents that they can play Champions League football and it's guaranteed. And in no case has that turned out to be true, right?
Right.
In recent years. It didn't happen for Fabio Carvalho. It didn't happen initially for Harvey Elliott. Interestingly, that if Elliott leaves Liverpool, we'll get a sell on for that. Maybe we'll come to that later in the piece. I would be trying to keep Kenny Tete. I know that there are other offers on the table for Kenny, but he hasn't broken off the negotiations. So I would hope that a deal gets done for him, because even if you don't sign Kenny Tete, you're going to have to go and get another right back. Simply because, even if you do sign Kenny Tete, I think you're going to have to go and get another right back, because both of those players have struggled with injuries, Tete and Castagna. But I think Tete in the final third offers you a great deal. I think he probably could go and play for a European contender.
Yeah.
Maybe in England, but also, back in France, potentially in Holland, in Spain or Italy. The level that he's been playing at when he's fit is of a Europa League qualifier, a Champions League qualifier. And he's a very good one-on-one defender. There's very few wingers when he's fit and on his game who have got the better of him since he's returned to the Premier League. And so Fulham are doing right to try and finalise those negotiations and get it over the line, but I'm sort of 50-50 over as to whether they will or not.
Okay.
And Stuart says, if someone's getting a bargain, absolutely on a free transfer. One of the problems is that we don't conclude these deals swiftly enough for my liking. And I guess we move on to TC.
Yeah.
Russ,
Yeah. Let's move on to Tom Cairney. And what's interesting here is that I get to hear more about this than maybe most do because of the presence. And I'm going to tell you right now, and it actually upsets me. The presence of Wrexham is huge here. I've told you this. It really is so big over here that the local media, I'm talking about in America, they pick up the stories. It's big over here that Tom Cairney might be going to Wrexham, that they're offering him $50K a week. This is reportedly, which is a very good sum of money. And
it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense, first of all.
Okay, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
So, the story to which you're referring said that Cairney was on 30 grand a week at Fulham, and he's on comfortably double that at the moment. I don't think I'm breaking any secrets to say that he's on more than Wrexham would be offering him. Okay. And also, it isn't just Wrexham, and I have no idea as to whether Wrexham have made a formal offer to Tom Cairney's representatives. I'm not part of that. What I know is that Marco Silva wants to keep him and that Tom Cairney wants to stay. The question is, I compare it to when Danny Murphy left Fulham. You'll remember we were doing shows we were doing shows and writing articles about that at the time, and we both thought that was a mistake.
Huge.
That Murphy left when he did, although ironically he wanted a 2-year deal and guarantee of playing. And when he went to Blackburn with Dixon Atuhu, as I remember, he didn't finish the 2-year deal. He called time on his playing career before then. And the impact upon Fulham of losing Murphy's ability to organise the midfield and even his influence in a dressing room was terminal to Fulham, because we lost Dembele and Dempsey as well, and suddenly we ended up with no midfield at all, and we paid for that with our Premier League status. Cairney, I think, is an interesting one because, and as Ben has written there, I think he still offers something to Fulham. Whether it's quantifiable in terms of statistics of how we play and how he has delivered for us is difficult to measure, because he got a lot of criticism, I felt unfair criticism, after the SW6 derby where we lost in the last 10 minutes, where perhaps Marco made a mistake in putting him and not Harrison Reed on the field. But equally, as a substitute this season, he's turned games around. One of them was at Tottenham before he got sent off. He came on and played a number of excellent cameos before Christmas and in January, and we don't need to recap just how talismanic he was in the game last week. The question becomes, how much can a manager guarantee a player anything at all? And also, do we offer Tom, do we extend his contract with a wage cut to recognise the fact that he's not a key player? I think actually Cairney's role is just as important in the training ground, off the field, bringing through young players like Josh King and someone we haven't really talked about, Seth Ridgen, who is currently captaining England's under-17s.
Under-17,
You'd have seen the clips of his
fantastic
performance against Belgium in the first match of that European Championship. Seth has actually been playing as a 16-year-old in the under-18s set up and briefly for the under-21s as well this season and done really well. He's actually the son of an Olympic medalist, middle distance runner for Great Britain, and you can see all of that stamina in the way he performs. I should say grandson, I think, rather than son. But the point being that Kearney has been there, seen it, and done it. And it's not sentiment here when you say that Tom Kearney has something still to offer. Obviously, in the right way and in the right matches. But I trust Marco Silva to be able to decipher when that is. And I think the wage budget of Fulham, especially if Willian, Vinicius, and a couple of other people are heading out the door, there are ways to balance that wage budget, to make sure that Kearney can still feature. And Kamal's summed it up there. I think actually he could also do a job for you in the first 60 minutes of matches. I've said this repeatedly. He keeps the ball far better, and we look at better passing team at a quicker tempo too when he's in his element. Is he going to be starting 20 games a season for us next season? Probably not. Can he make 20 to 25 appearances, maybe more from the bench? Absolutely. Until we're stronger in that area, and actually buying two £20 million players to replace Tom Kearney is probably going to prove more difficult and more expensive.
It's a good point, Dan. It's a good point. It's something that we're going to have to watch, but I'm glad that we're talking about this because I've said this several times, and I think I'm being proven that I'm wrong on this. I wanted Fulham to basically get a little bit younger, and I thought Kearney was one that you can move on from. But I think the argument now is the exact opposite. I think he has a lot to offer in a limited role, but as you said, maybe even more as a mentor role. I think there's something to be said about that with the young players, bringing them along. I that's a great point, Dan. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I do see his value. I think it comes down to price, and that's what's interesting about this. But I wanted to mention the Wrexham part of it because it's really annoying me seeing all the talk with Wrexham and all the stuff that you get over here, especially with Welcome to Wrexham's new season dropping. It's all I've been just inundated with stuff about Kearney, and I'm thinking, why? But
it's very clever marketing from Wrexham, because what they've done is rather like what Tottenham do every summer. They convince their fans that they're going in for big players. And there's no evidence that Wrexham have made a concrete offer for Tom Kearney. They might well have done. What's interesting is he certainly has had interest from MLS franchises, right? To go and play in America. Interesting comparison there from Chris.
Would you agree with that, Dan?
I'm a massive fan of James Milner.
I know you are.
Ever since he came on to the scene with Leeds and with England, and I thought England underutilised him. I'd actually go as far as to say, Milner didn't play for Liverpool over that long period of time. His experience is invaluable, and you need experience. But there are very few Fulham players who can do what Tom Kearney does and can settle a game down. Ben's absolutely right. He's a part of the furniture. He's been there through the ups and downs, and you shouldn't let sentiment run your business in any way, shape, or form. But I think there are footballing reasons why we could do with another year of Tom Kearney. And I know that Marco Silva, in what he said very clearly after that game, he wants Kearney to stay. So as far as I'm concerned, if Fulham want to keep Marco Silva, and they do, and Marco Silva wants to stay, then two things need to happen, or three things. In fact, you need to conclude these negotiations positively to make Fulham stronger and to make the rebuild less difficult immediately. And then you need to go and back Marco Silva with the means to strengthen his squad, because I think in the broader sense of things, the only reason Fulham are so high up in the table is because of the likes of Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspur, West Ham United, significantly underperforming this season. And we may finish with our highest points total and finish in 12th. right?
Right.
Which is an interesting commentary on the state of the league and how much we've dropped off over the last month or so, largely because Marco hasn't had the numbers to shuffle things up. But also because there's been uncertainty in the dressing room about the future of several key players. And I think if you're running a profitable and truly Premier League club, the future of these key players is sorted out in November, in October. People know where they are, and you can plan going forward. And I don't know whose fault that is, that isn't done. Maybe the manager wants to wait towards closer to the end of the season to see whether somebody like Kearney can play a key role. But interestingly, on to your next point, as you brought it up, the key part about this press conference was that Marco Silva has insisted today that that the report about him turning down a Fulham contract are incorrect, and then he's not had detailed discussions with the Fulham board, or his representatives haven't, because he wants to concentrate on seeing out the season, and because he stresses that he already has another year on his contract. It's not like his future is up in the air. He's spent previous press conferences saying, I'm not going to Al Hilal, I'm not going to Tottenham, I'm not going anywhere else, I'm committed to Fulham Football Club. And what he said is very clearly, the club has many important things to. In fact, shall I quote from it in its entirety rather than paraphrasing? Just hold on. While
that's
I
fine, Dan. While you pull that up, I'll just talk a little bit. Yeah, bring up your notes.
Yeah, I've got it here. So we didn't even start the conversations. I know that there are some rumours around that I refused something from my side. It's not true. My connection with Fulham is very, very strong. It is clear that there are so many things to be careful about with the players' contract situations. There are many important decisions ahead, with summer coming up after a great season where we improved like all the other years before. We managed to reach some great numbers again, the best Premier League points tally in our history. And if you want to improve, you have to focus on the most important things. I'm not saying the manager's situation is not important, but I'm still under contract with the club. I just wanted to clarify that the conversations didn't start, and that's not for professional reasons, but it was just not the right moment.
Okay.
And I think that's fairly definitive.
Right.
Even though we both know, Russ, that there have been initial conversations between Silva's agent and other parties, and Silva's agent and Fulham, both to establish that he doesn't want to go to places where he's been linked to before, and that he's interested in extending his contract at Fulham. But the detailed discussions about what he would want in terms of an increase in salary or not, bonus structure and length of contract have not yet begun, because he was always very clear publicly and privately that he wanted to concentrate on getting as many points as possible.
And you know what? I respect that, Dan. And I respect that they're going to have the larger conversation. I think the initial conversation has happened between his agent and the club. I think that's fair to say, right? But now it's going to come down to everything that you've just talked about, Dan. After the season's over, it'll come down to, what are you going to pay me? Are you going to back me? And who are you going to keep? I think those are all factors in this, but he's under contract for another season. I don't see him going anywhere. We can see all the speculation. We saw all the stuff with Al Hilal, obviously Tottenham, and that is all played out in the press. And I will say it right now that I think some of the Tottenham stuff could be planted by agent, could be planted by Tottenham themselves. I don't know, but I just think that that's all talk at this point, because I actually believe this to be true. Initial talks probably have happened then, but the real talks, they haven't happened yet. And I think a lot has to happen. And I do like the fact that he's just concentrating on getting through the season, and then they can negotiate. And hopefully the negotiations go well, because his job at Fulham is not complete yet. And that's why I don't see him leaving anytime soon. I don't, because I think he sees the potential that the club has. We have missed out on Europe, Dan. I got it wrong. I said 7th. I can put my hand up and say, Russ Goldman, wrong again. But you know what? They weren't that far off. And I think what he probably needs to figure out as a coach and really look back, why did we not reach that goal? And what does he need to reach that goal next season and seasons beyond that, Dan? So I feel good that he's going to be with Fulham, not just next season, but I think he will sign a new contract, Dan. I just think a lot has to happen in the coming weeks for that to come to fruition. But I don't see him going to another team right now. The job's not done yet, Dan. That's the way I look at it.
Well, it's not done, but the only caveat becomes if a more attractive job comes on the market.
Yeah.
You know, in the managerial merry-go-round that's going to happen, if a Champions League qualifier, and Chris sums it up there, you know, Chris is a Liverpool fan who has seen Marco Silva's ambition on Merseyside, right? The blue half of Merseyside. You know, Everton would be in an entirely better position had they held on to Marco Silva and not pulled the trigger after Liverpool hammered them in a Merseyside derby. I think in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, at Goodison. Now, the only problem becomes if a big job comes up and somebody makes Marco Silva their first choice and that club has the means to go and invest heavily and compete in the Champions League, right? If you put that on the table next to Fulham, then Fulham's ambition is going to be sorely challenged. I don't include Tottenham Hotspur in that conversation because although they've now qualified for the Champions League, and I'm pleased for Ange Postecoglou. I think he's gone through a really difficult period at Tottenham, and I think he's a very good coach. But I'm sorry for him because he has to put up with Daniel Levy, right?
That's the whole thing.
That's the problem. That's the reason why.
It's a big problem.
You know, right. Well, it's a big problem, but it's also a reason why Marco Silva would look twice at going to Tottenham Hotspur.
Exactly. I've been saying that time and time again, Dan. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just as he looked twice at going to. No. But the point is, Marco did go and talk to Manchester United a couple of summers ago, or was it even last summer, about their vacancy, and he's probably glad that he wasn't asked back for a further interview. Rather wait for the Carnes or Levy. Well, Sir Alex Ferguson once made the point in a seminar to young managers and his own players that you choose your ownership. Right, Marco Silva was persuaded to take that Fulham job by Shad Khan.
Right.
Only Marco Silva can. The Khan family have matched his ambition throughout, but you can't argue. And we've been critical of Fulham's ownership over many shows and many years, and even the previous ownership. And we might have disagreements about this, that, and the other, including how much they charge us for ticket prices, but you can't argue with the amount of money that football club. Are they ambitious enough to get Fulham to the top level? Well, we don't know because unfortunately the owners speak about their ambitions. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they're therefore not ridiculed. But I think that Marco Silva remaining at the club for this long shows you that he believes, A, they're fairly ambitious. And also, B, the point we haven't spoken about is he has more control now over the decision-making of Fulham Football Club's board than he did when he started, right? And that is a positive development because you do need a control on a manager who says, I want this, this, and this, and you must buy me these players, and also a check utilising statistics or another pair of eyes, but you do need to back and support a manager who's proven himself able to achieve far more than we thought he would do in this time frame.
No, very good there, Dan. And again, I think this is something that's going to play out in the upcoming weeks. I want to mention that I will be doing several shows coming up. You know, it's funny because the season's going to end on Sunday, but it's certainly not going to end for me because I plan on doing a lot of shows. And yes, I will be doing several shows that will actually be exclusive on Patreon. I'll be doing some free shows as well. But I want to follow this whole situation with Marco, what the Cons are going to do, not just with Marco, but the players that we're just been talking about, and other players as well, and who they're going to bring in. There's a lot to talk about. Cottage talk never ends, and we're going to continue going on. But before we break down the match, Dan, and do a little quick preview, I want to actually talk a little bit about Stuart Gray. I think Stuart Gray is a coach that doesn't get enough credit. I think Stuart Gray deserves so much credit for being at Fulham for such a long period of time through several managers and continues to have an impact on the club. And I want to wish him the best on him retiring from being a coach, but he has offered a lot. And I watched a video that Fulham released, and it's very good. It's an interview with Stuart Gray. He talks about his early days when he was actually an interim manager for Fulham, and take it to where we are now. It's pretty amazing. And the managers that he's worked with, obviously Savisa, Scott Parker, and then, of course, you have Marco Silva, and he talks about that as well. So I would highly recommend watching this video on the Fulham website. Definitely recommend it. Dan, thoughts on Stuart Gray?
It's really emotional, Russ. I hoped that it wouldn't be true that he'd be leaving Fulham Football Club, but Stuart has to make the best decisions for his family, who I think he references it briefly in that interview, and Fulham certainly did in their tribute to him this morning or on the website, I think written by Jeff Bruce, talking about that he's had a 48-year career in professional football since he turned professional at age 17, a very accomplished player in his own right.
Yep.
Who played at some very big clubs and became one of Britain's top coaches. Interestingly, it didn't quite work out for him when he took charge of. We should ask Simon Peach about how he felt about Stuart Gray taking over at
Southampton.
And he's one of those people who was more accustomed and more accomplished as a number 2 or a number 3 than a manager, although he was thrust into that caretaker 3-month interregnum where we had 3 caretaker managers after Fulham fired or sacked Kit Simons. I thought that was a sign that things were not all well at Fulham Football Club. But what he's delivered in terms of defensive solidity, which was always his hallmark as a coach, he's done a bit of everything, and he's been a sounding board for several managers, some of them more experienced in English football than others. But Savisa valued his input. Certainly Scott Parker did. And it was very interesting that when he did depart the club at the start of that 2018-2019 season, things went badly, right? Defensively, we were all over the shop. Now, having him back and as a key part of the coaching staff has been a real boon to Fulham. And I just want to say I've met him a few times personally and professionally, and he's an absolute gentleman. He cares deeply about Fulham Football Club. He cares deeply about the development of young players. He's very willing to listen to motor mouths like me, tell him about what I might think about tactical approach or things like that. We shared a taxi, or at least waiting for a taxi, out of the Majeski Stadium the day when Thomas Callas got sent off after about 90 seconds.
I remember that.
And Piazon, who scored the equaliser very late on. But the point is, I walked around with a friend of mine to a place where we were told we could get a taxi, and we ended up outside or even inside the VIP area, unbeknown to I'm not a VIP. I was obviously trespassing on that occasion. But Stuart and some of the rest of the Fulham coaching staff were in very high spirits, and he was very generous with his time before games, and also on a train ride. The 3 times I spent a great deal of time in his company. He was very generous, very erudite, very friendly. And you can see from the warmth of the tributes today that he will be a huge loss, much like Luis Belmonte's departure was a real disruption to the fabric of the football club. And you can't underestimate how important it is to have a cool head and experienced head who's been there, seen it and done it on the touchline and in and around the club when the pressure is on going into those big games, or just offering the odd word of advice to a player, to a coach, to a manager. And I think Fulham Football Club will be poorer for Stuart not being part of the coaching staff, but hopefully Stuart's life has been enriched by his experiences at Craven Cottage. And, as Fulham said very, very clearly and very movingly today, he'll always be welcome back at Craven Cottage. And I hope retirement, which I understand it is, I hope he moves on to the next chapter. I don't think someone like Stuart Gray will be retiring from football full time and turning off the television when it's on. He's got far too much to offer. Yeah. So maybe it's, 1 day a week or doing some work with an academy. He's always been very interested in the development of young players. So I think there's a role for him going forward, but it has to be said, as people have said already in the comments, that contribution to Fulham Football Club, and he's a key reason why we've been so successful over the last decade.
Absolutely.
3 promotions from the Championship. A very tough league to get out of, and most recently not being in danger of going back there. And yes, you might say that that's Marco Silva, but Marco would be very quick to share the credit for that and put it where it needs to be, which is on the strength of his backroom staff.
Okay, excellent stuff, Dan. And I agree with all that. It's funny because I've seen assistant coaches, as we would say over here, leave and how it can affect the team. I'm glad that you brought up Bo Morte. I've always been wondering about that this season. Has it affected Fulham? And I think losing Stuart Gray will affect Fulham. So I'm glad that we're talking about that. And I wish him all the best. He's given so much to the club. So thank you, Stuart Gray, if you're listening to the podcast. All right. Okay, Dan, let's do a quick preview of this upcoming match. We can talk a little bit about Man City to get us going, and I'll just share my thoughts and I'll just go to you. It's funny because I remember when we played them early in the season, I didn't have much expectation, and I always think that this is a match that a team that Marco just enjoys playing against. I think part of it has to do with going up against Pep Guardiola. I think he enjoys the challenge. You want to go up against the best coaches, the best teams. So he gets that opportunity. They played very well, I thought, earlier in the season at Manchester City. Well, now it's at Fulham. It's at Craven Cottage. And really, besides adding to the points total, beating Brentford, which would be nice, and ending, if we could, 9th, which would be great, considering everything going on. There isn't so much to play for, but there is something to play for. There's not nothing. But I do think that this is a team. I've watched Manchester City several times, and I think under normal circumstances, it would be much more difficult. But this season, I think they legitimately have a chance, Dan, to win this match at Craven Cottage. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting you say Marco Silva likes going up against Pep Guardiola. He's got the worst record of any manager who's ever faced Pep Guardiola. 14 matches, 14 defeats.
That doesn't mean that he doesn't like the challenge.
No, quite. I think they're very similar, but they're very similar coaches in the way that they approach the game. But I know he's frustrated at not being able to get one over on Pep, and we probably should have done it earlier in the season. I remember getting a text from a Manchester City fan saying, "You are the team who've shown everyone else how to play against us," and then everyone else started to beat us. And yet I remember Adama Traore screeching past Kyle Walker, and that was the moment you knew Kyle Walker was finished in the Premier League. And we scored an incredible goal that day, the back-heeled Rabona.
Yep.
from Raul Jimenez into Andres Pereira, and we kept going right until the end. But you left the Etihad that day, as I'm sure you did, reflect on that game, thinking that's at least 1 point gone, and
Yeah.
we could have had three. Now, City's sort of decline from where they have been is interesting, but not surprising, given that all the other internal pressures that are going on there. They've obviously got the issues with the charges
Yeah.
that they say they play through all of that, and it doesn't affect them,
Uh,
but it must do. You're seeing a changing of the guard. I'm very surprised that Manchester City have called time on Kevin De Bruyne.
I know.
Ultimately,
I'm very surprised by
he's
that.
very surprised about that too, and still thinks he can play in the Premier League. Don't think our wage structure would stretch to it, and it doesn't necessarily help get any younger. But you certainly think there's a place for him in England rather
Oh,
than him going off to play in America
well,
or Saudi Arabia or
well,
somewhere else. You
okay.
then look at go on.
I was going to say there's a report today that he could be signing with the Chicago Fire here.
Oh, and I'm sure a lot of I know a lot of MLS franchises are interested, but I think De Bruyne probably thinks and has said he thinks he can still do it in the Premier League. There's very interesting comments from Phil Foden yesterday talking about how he struggled mentally over the last 12 to 18 months and has been asked to be excluded in England squad. City also had that key injury to Rodri
Raji,
at a
yeah.
time when they were, still scrapping on all fronts. Mateo Kovacic is suspended, I think, from tomorrow's game. Rodri himself got injured and won't play from the start, I don't think, on Sunday. Also, John Stones is missing. But then you look at the squad list of the people they've still got, Russ, and some
I
of those
know.
young players like
Oscar Bob. I like Oscar
Nico
Bob.
Nico Riley, James McAtee.
James McAtee,
Interestingly,
yeah.
somebody who we've been linked with in the past, and he's probably likely to leave. You look at Jeremy Doku. The list goes on and on.
Yep.
Omar Mamouche has come in and done really well. So, look, I think I share your optimism in that there's a potential for Fulham to do something. And also, people say that there's nothing riding on this game. There's a lot of money riding on this game,
Yep.
given where Fulham might finish in the Premier League table. Maybe not a lot of money to a billionaire like Shad Khan, but it'll make a difference in terms of how Fulham finish and the prize money. And I think also, if we're looking at a season that's been better probably than we expected at the beginning of the season, well, not you, but better than most of us would have expected at the beginning of the season, but probably worse than we hoped for, 6 or 7 weeks ago. I remember when we talked with Max in that very room that you're broadcasting from, that there were opportunities for us to qualify for Europe. We still, the main reason why we haven't been successful in getting into those European spots is actually our home form. We haven't been good enough at home, and we'd like to finish off on a high, but you're going to have to deal with City's dominance of possession, their technical ability, and their ability to go from front to back really quickly. And you're also going to have to be on it from the beginning, which we just, when we've been on it from the beginning, we haven't been able to knit 45 minutes together, and it's the last game of the season.
Yep.
I don't know what Fulham side is going to show up, but I hope it's an excellent performance. And given that something is riding on it for Manchester City, they need at least a point and probably 3. It's going to be a competitive game, or if we're not up for it, they'll steamroll us, and nobody wants to see that, do they?
No, Dan. But like you said, that's also motivation because there is something on it for Manchester City. So maybe that adds to the fuel for Fulham to do something. But like you said, Dan, you're not just talking about a half. You need a full on 90 plus minute performance. And if you don't have that against this team, you're not getting anything. You're going to lose. And as you said, you could get steamrolled. Let's hope that's not what happens. All right, Dan, you're Marco. I'll make you Marco Silva for just this show. How does Fulham win this match?
By playing in a similar way to we did in the reverse fixture, but if it makes any more sense, by being a little more aggressive because you're at home, by using the tight confines of Craven Cottage,
Use it to your advantage.
by
Yeah.
yeah, by trying to change things up and get runners in and around Raul Jimenez, that you said you were going to run through your lineup.
Yep, I am.
And it'll be interesting to see what you think in terms of who we should play and how we should do it. But I think the Traore Jimenez axis proved its worth on Sunday in Hounslow, and there are also other players who'll be desperate to finish strongly, not only to finish the season well, but also to lay down a marker for next season, particularly the people who've either signed a contract or have years remaining on their contract, because they might want to offer a last indication of what they can do before the manager and the Fulham hierarchy go out and buy players in their position.
Okay. And of course, thank you, Chris, for saying that. Play the way Fulham did against Liverpool, get in the city's faces. I agree with Chris on that. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you can't show any respect to these teams. You can respect their ability, but the best way to respect them is to disrupt the way
What
that
they
they
do.
play football.
Yes. Totally
And
agree with you.
at times this season we've been too passive, and it'd be a nice way to lay down a marker. We've been poor against the sides who finished in the lower reaches of the Premier League. We'd like to finish in the top half. I think that's actually psychologically very important.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Dan, it's time to go to starting 11. I'll give mine, you give yours, and then we can decide or just talk about, do you think Marco will do anything different? So I'm going to go with my starting 11. And what's interesting doing this is that while we're talking about it, I'm thinking about the last time Fulham played against Man City and thinking maybe there should be something similar. So I'll go with Leno, Tete, obviously Anderson, Bassi, and Jedi. That's where I'm going to go for the back four along with Leno. On the left, I'm actually going to do what he did here. I'm going to go Traore and then Iwobi on the right, because Iwobi was helping out actually on the right-hand side. And then this is where it gets a little tricky, Dan, because I'm going to do Berg and Lukic, but there's a big part of me that wants to start Josh King. So I'm going to go with the Josh King. But if I'm not going Josh King, I would definitely go with Emil Smith-Rowe and then Raul up front. I'm going to lay it down and I'm going to say I'm going to go with Josh King as your number 10. So that's what I'm going to go with.
Okay, and no Ryan Sessegnon again.
No Ryan Sessegnon. And the reason why is that I'm looking at the last time Fulham played. There's a strong argument to play Ryan, but I'm just trying to replicate what they did at the Etihad.
Okay, I got you. So, I mean, I don't know that Anthony Robinson, we haven't spoken about this, but Pochettino was talking about Robinson's injury prognosis.
Yes, I saw that.
In the build-up and the reasons why he won't be featuring or will be featuring less for America in the summer period.
Chris is already eliminating me, by the way. Russell.
Well,
okay.
it's a common emotion. Don't worry. Happened to me many times over the 14 years of doing this program. So let me just give my 11, and there was no conferring viewers before we did this. So I would go Leno in goal, obviously. Probably the same back four as Russ, given whether Robinson's fit enough. But I would go Lukic and Kearney.
Okay, so you're bringing Kearney back.
Because I thought Sander was disappointing in the
was.
derby. And I would want someone to put their foot on the ball in there. Then on the right, I'd go with Sessegnon,
Okay.
and on the left with Traore, but
Priori.
with the opportunity for them to switch around. And then I play Smith Rowe behind simply because I think actually Emil will be able to stretch the game a little bit more, but it also allows for people to come in from the bench, and it's exceptionally harsh on Harry Wilson. But the reason I picked Sessegnon wide right is because of his ability to track back and help out defensively. But you know, if I'm Harry Wilson, I'll be banging my own door down. You can even play Harry Wilson in the number 10 position. I don't think
You
that's
absolutely could.
I
That's a
don't
good
think
point.
that's a non-starter.
No.
But there's a reason why both of us aren't Marco, and he'll come up with something to. I think actually what Fulham did very effectively at the Etihad was actually drop Andreas Pereira into a deeper
That's
midfield
true.
position when Manchester City had the ball, and that would probably suit King or even an Alex Iwobi to go and play in that third central midfield role, and then you could shunt Emil Smith Rowe over to the left side, inside left, where he's played effectively for Fulham before, with and without the ball.
Okay, very good. All right. And we'll have to see what Marco's going to do, because like you said, Dan, he'll probably do something completely different than what we're predicting. But we shall see.
Go with the 5 at the back.
He could go 5 at the back. Very good point. He could do that. All right, let's go to prediction. Dan, because you know I'm so positive, I'll go first here. 2-1 to Fulham. I'm going for the upset. You know I have to, so I'm going 2-1 to Fulham.
I already put my prediction in somewhere else as a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. I would take a 1-1 draw.
I felt that was pretty optimistic, to be fair, until I heard you going all out for the victory.
Because that's what I do, Dan. You know, that's why you love me, Dan. You love my optimism. You said that to me.
I do.
It's infectious.
Now let me ask you a question.
Yep.
Where will you be watching? I gather that you had. In fact, I know that you had an excellent last Sunday with the boys and girls from Fulham, Boston.
Yes.
Was it in Somerville? Where was that?
It was in Somerville at a place called Old Magoon Saloon, and it was very good. They took good care of us, and I promised the guys that I will be back soon. I'm not sure if I can get there for this Sunday. I'm not sure. I'm trying to check my schedule.
I know that Mike Levy would want me to tell you that you're a good luck charm, and it will be entirely your fault if Fulham don't win.
No, don't say that, Dan.
It will be if Fulham don't win and you're not there.
Don't put this on me.
But the actual serious point of mentioning this is to the American listeners and viewers of this show, is that there are a number of places where people can get together and watch these games. And Russ did his podcast there last week, and I thought it was an excellent episode, mainly because I wasn't wittering on about the match myself. There are plenty of places where you can get together and share the Fulham America love on Memorial Day weekend, is it not?
Memorial Day weekend.
And Mission Impossible has been released over here.
Oh, I want to see that, by the way.
Perhaps Fulham could complete their own Mission Impossible and deliver a Marco Silva victory over Manchester City.
I hope so, Dan. But one final thought about my experience with Fulham Boston, just in general, because there are so many supporters groups now here in America, and they spend their mornings together watching Fulham, and that is an amazing thing. It's funny because we were talking about, when I was at Fulham Boston, I was speaking to a different Mike, and our experiences were very similar. We were talking about the early days. He came along the same time I did with Clint Dempsey. We did the same exact thing. We started following Fulham because of Clint. But we talked about back then, we struggled to find anything, like any matches. We were, I had to follow this on ESPN, just updates on ESPN going back to like 2007, because the matches weren't really being shown. And you really had to be committed, or needed to be actually committed to be a Fulham supporter back then. But it's come so far since then. And now with the coverage of NBC and Peacock, you now have the ability to go everywhere around my country and watch it with a bunch of Fulham supporters. It's really a wonderful thing. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the guys from Fulham Boston. That's going to be my final thoughts. Dan, I'll give you your final thoughts. You get the final word on this episode of Cottage Talk.
That's very kind of you. I would just say that it's obviously not just the community in America. It was a fantastic podcast with the best name of any of the Fulham podcasts. I've said this before. That's So Craven from our friends in Australia, and indeed Mary Southgate was a participant in that, friend of our show. Last night, and there are the crazy nutters of Fulham South Africa, who I'm sure you will
I've heard of
be
them,
familiar. Familiar with their video content out there as well, and many other supporters. Fulham Argentina, even Fulham Turkey has popped up on my
I've seen that,
this week. So
Fulham Italy.
It's Fulham Italy, Fulham France, Fulham España, Fulham Japan, Fulham Hong Kong, Fulham Argentina. You know, God bless them all. God bless the worldwide mighty whites. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you, Ross. Let's hope that, as Kamal says, we're going to get a strong King 2-0 victory, as he's predicted there. And whatever happens, we're very lucky to support London's oldest professional football club. There's something very special about Fulham Football Club. Thanks, Ross.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And before we go, I just want to mention, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and I'm going to mention as well, we have a lot coming to you after the season ends. And in fact, I'm going to put it into a higher gear once we end the season, because the one thing that frustrates me during that period is that there really isn't enough talk on Fulham, and I plan on giving it to you. And I'll be giving it to you with free episodes of the podcast, but I'm also going to be doing even more content on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. If you're interested, please check it out. I would highly recommend it. I've made it reasonably priced, but I'm going to be giving you a lot more content. I'm not going to let that slip. It's going to continue, because a passion of mine is talking Fulham, and I'm going to continue to do that as we lead up to the next season. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. He is Dan Crawford from hamman.com and the Green Pole Podcast. I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.